It was the last thing I ever expected. The old family ring, something I'd kept tucked away for decades, barely thinking about, was taken from me, and with it, everything I thought I knew about my family came crashing down. What I didn't realize, until much later, was that it was worth more than my house, more than everything I'd worked for. And what Emma did next changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. Now, let me tell you how this all started. My name is Mary Dawson, and I'm 72 years old. I've lived in the same small town my entire life, raised 2 children, and watched my family grow. I've spent my days tending to my garden, crocheting in the evenings, and quietly enjoying the simple things, until Emma came into our lives. She married my son, Brian, and I thought she'd be the perfect addition to the family. But there's something about her that never sat right with me, even before I knew what she'd do. It was an ordinary Saturday morning when Emma called. She said she needed the ring for a party she was going to. Just for a little while, she promised. I was hesitant, of course. The ring wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was my late husband's legacy, a reminder of the love we shared. But I didn't want it to be difficult. After all, it was just a party. I didn't think anything could go wrong. How could I have known that one simple gesture would lead to such chaos? I handed her the ring, against my better judgment. It was beautiful, a thick band of gold with a diamond the size of a marble, something that had been passed down through generations. But Emma made it seem so insignificant, like it was just another piece of jewelry. I told myself it would be okay, that it was no big deal. But the moment she walked out that door, something inside me felt uneasy. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, when I asked Emma about the ring, that the truth came out. And when I found out just how much that ring was worth, I realized just how deep the betrayal ran. Stay with me, what happened next will shock you. I wish I could say that I knew everything was going wrong the moment Emma handed me the ring back, but the truth didn't hit me until much later. At first, I was just glad to get it back, hoping she hadn't damaged it while showing off at some party. But as soon as I held the ring in my hand again, something was different. The weight felt wrong. It was as if the gold had grown heavier, and when I looked at the diamond, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. 2 weeks later, I finally worked up the nerve to ask Emma about it. How was the party? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, though I could feel the tension building inside me. It was fine, she said, brushing me off with a quick smile. It went great. Thanks for letting me borrow the ring. That was when I noticed it, the way she didn't look me in the eye. She was hiding something, and deep down, I knew it had to do with the ring. So, I asked her again, more forcefully this time. Emma, did you return the ring in the same condition it was in? No scratches, no damage? She hesitated for a second, but then shrugged it off. Of course. It was just a party. You really need to relax. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was something about her tone, that casual dismissal, that made my heart race with suspicion. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning the ring over in my hands, watching the way the light danced off the diamond. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was my husband's last gift to me. I started to question everything. What was Emma really up to? The next morning, I decided to take the ring to a local jeweler, just to make sure it was still in good shape. I thought maybe I was overreacting, but the moment the jeweler's eyes lit up as he inspected it, I knew I wasn't. Ma'am, do you have any idea how much this ring is worth? He asked, his voice filled with shock. I stared at him, dumbfounded. I never thought it was worth anything special. It's just an old family heirloom. The jeweler shook his head. This isn't just any heirloom, ma'am. This is worth millions. You could sell this and live comfortably for the rest of your life. I almost dropped the ring in shock. The thing I had believed was worthless, just a sentimental token, was worth more than I could ever have imagined. The full weight of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. Emma had known. She had known, and she'd taken it, not because she needed it for a party, but because she'd seen it as an opportunity. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about a ring. It was about everything she had stolen from me. The rage that built inside me was suffocating. I didn't care about the money, I cared about the fact that Emma had manipulated me. Stolen from me, and worse, she thought she could get away with it. Stay with me. Because what happens next will leave you speechless. I didn't waste any time. The moment I learned the truth, I knew what I had to do. Emma wasn't going to get away with this. She thought she could play me for a fool, but I wasn't going to stand by while she stole from me, not my legacy, not my family's honor. I would make her pay for what she'd done. I called her that afternoon. Her voice was upbeat, almost too cheerful. "Hi, Mary. Everything okay?" she asked, but I could tell she was avoiding the topic. I didn't give her a chance to change the subject. "Emma, we need to talk about the ring," I said, my voice steady but firm. She laughed nervously. "Oh, I thought we were past that. I gave it back, didn't I?" "Stop lying," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "You took that ring, and you knew exactly what it was worth. I want to know why." There was silence on the other end. Then, a quick sigh. "Mary, it's just a ring. What's the big deal?" I could feel the blood rushing to my head. I tried to stay calm, but the anger was bubbling up, and I couldn't keep it down anymore. "It's not just a ring, Emma. That ring was my husband's. It's worth millions. And you took it for a damn party. You think I'm going to let that go?" She went quiet. For a second, I thought she might come clean. But then she said, "Mary, I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know it was worth that much. I just needed something to wear." I couldn't believe it. She still wasn't owning up to it. She wasn't even sorry for what she'd done. All she cared about was getting off easy, brushing it off like it was no big deal. But I knew, deep down, it was bigger than that. She had to pay for what she'd done. "You're lying, Emma," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "You knew what you were doing. And now, you're going to face the consequences." I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. I didn't need to hear more of her excuses. I was done with her lies. I was done with her manipulation. That night, I called Brian. He didn't know anything about the ring's true value, of course. He thought I was just being sentimental about it. I didn't want to drag him into this, but I had no choice. I needed him to understand. I needed him to see that Emma wasn't the woman he thought she was. When I told him, he didn't believe me at first. "Mom, you're overreacting," he said. "It's just a ring." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You don't understand, Brian. She took something that wasn't hers. She took something that belongs to this family." He sighed. "I'll talk to her, okay? Let's just calm down." But I wasn't going to calm down. I wasn't going to let Emma think she could walk away from this without facing the truth. I knew what I had to do. I had to make sure she paid for what she did. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I was done playing nice. This wasn't just about a ring anymore. This was about respect. And I was going to make Emma learn the hard way. The days after I called the lawyer were a blur. I had never been one for confrontation, never one to make waves in the family. But Emma had pushed me to my breaking point. I had no choice but to take action. It wasn't just about the ring anymore, it was about standing up for myself, standing up for what was mine. And making sure Emma knew there were consequences for her actions. I kept thinking about what I'd said to Brian. He was still trying to be the peacekeeper. Still trying to smooth things over with Emma. But I knew deep down that he wasn't fully on my side, not the way I needed him to be. I loved my son, but this wasn't something I could let slide. It was more than just a family squabble, it was about betrayal. And Emma had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could to build my case. I dug through old family documents, looking for any proof that the ring had been passed down through the generations, any evidence that it wasn't just some random piece of jewelry. I found a few things: old letters from my husband to his father, a note written by my mother about how the ring had been in our family for decades. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show that this wasn't just a trinket. It was a piece of history, a symbol of my family's legacy. As I gathered the evidence, I couldn't help but feel a wave of sadness. This wasn't how I wanted to spend my final years, fighting my own family. But Emma had made this choice. She had made her bed, and now she would have to lie in it. When I finally filed the papers, I felt a strange sense of calm. It wasn't a sense of victory, not yet, but it was the first step toward getting the justice I deserved. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I knew Emma would fight back, and she'd probably try to turn Brian against me. But I couldn't back down. Not now. Her words stung, but they didn't have the power they once would have. I had already won. Emma had already paid the price. And as I sat there, staring at the phone, I knew something had changed within me, too. I wasn't the same woman who had let her family walk all over her for years. I was someone who could stand up for herself, who could protect what mattered most, but even as the victory settled in, I knew the real cost of it all. I had lost something, too, my faith in the family I had trusted so much. And while I had made Emma face the consequences of her actions, I couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to heal the wounds she had caused. Stay with me, because what happens next will change everything for Mary and her family. The days after the court ruling were tense, and the quiet in the house was deafening. Brian barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was always about something neutral, weather, the news, anything to avoid discussing what had happened. I didn't expect him to be happy with the way things had turned out, but I had hoped for some understanding. But that was the thing about betrayal, it doesn't just tear apart the person who's been wronged. It ripples through the family, affecting everyone. I found myself replaying Emma's words over and over in my head. "You'll regret this, Mary." I tried not to let them bother me, but deep down, I feared she might be right. What had I really won in the end? Sure, I had gotten the ring back, and Emma had been forced to pay restitution. But what about the family? What about Brian, my son, the one person I wanted to stand by me in this fight? Was I losing him, too? The next few days, I tried reaching out to him. I invited him over for dinner, hoping for a chance to talk, to explain why I had done what I did. I couldn't make him understand if he didn't know the full picture, but every time I tried, he brushed me off. "Mom, I don't want to talk about it. Just leave it alone," he would say. It was a crushing blow, hearing him speak like that. I wasn't some outsider. I was his mother. But it felt like I was being pushed further and further away, as if my actions had somehow made me the enemy. I began to wonder if, in trying to protect my legacy, I had lost the only family I had left. I couldn't let it go, though. No matter how much it hurt, I had to see this through. I had made a stand, not just for myself, but for the values I'd spent my whole life upholding. Honor, trust, respect. I couldn't just walk away from those now. That's when I got a call from my lawyer. He told me that Emma had filed an appeal, claiming that the ruling was unfair, that it had ruined her life. She had hired a new lawyer, someone who was known for being ruthless. I couldn't believe it. After everything, she was still trying to turn this around, still trying to twist the situation so that she could play the victim. I felt a surge of anger. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Emma was going to fight this, but I wasn't backing down. If she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. I had the ring. I had the legal documents. And I was going to make sure she faced the consequences of her actions, whether she liked it or not. I called Brian again. This time, my voice was firm. "We need to talk," I said, "no room for argument. Emma's appealing the decision. She's not giving up, Brian. And I won't either." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought he might hang up on me again. But then he finally spoke, his voice quieter than I expected. "I don't know what you want me to say, Mom. I want you to understand that this isn't just about a ring," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is about what Emma has done to this family. She's lied. She's manipulated everyone. And if we don't stand up to her now, she'll keep doing it." "I don't know, Mom," he replied, and I could hear the strain in his voice. "I just don't want this to tear us apart." "You're right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But if we don't face this now, we'll lose more than just a ring. We'll lose each other." There was a long silence, and then, finally, he spoke again, his voice tinged with resignation. "I'll talk to Emma. I'll see what I can do." It wasn't the full support I had hoped for, but it was something. And for the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to fix things. Maybe we could salvage the family after all the damage had been done. As I sat there, holding the phone in my hand, I realized something. No matter how this turned out, I had done what I had to do. I had stood up for myself. I had stood up for my family's honor. And if that meant losing everything, then I would carry the weight of that decision. But I wouldn't go down without a fight, the battle wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. The weeks that followed felt like a slow, crushing march toward a final confrontation. I could feel Emma's presence in every corner of my house, in every conversation with Brian, in every quiet glance that passed between us. The tension was unbearable. Brian was trying, in his own way, to hold everything together, but it was clear he was torn. Torn between his loyalty to his wife and the realization that Emma's actions had gone too far. One evening, I sat down to write a letter to my sister. I needed to get my thoughts out, needed someone to hear me. As I wrote, my hands shook. I poured my heart into the letter, recounting everything that had happened, from the day Emma took the ring to the moment I filed for the legal battle. But I couldn't send it. It felt too personal, too raw. I wasn't ready to share my pain with anyone else yet, not even my sister. This wasn't just about the ring anymore. It was about my family, about the lies, the betrayal, and the bitter cost of standing up for what was right. The next day, I received another call from my lawyer. Emma's appeal was gaining traction, and we were going to have to go back to court. This time, I wasn't going to sit there in silence, hoping for the best. I had to be prepared for whatever she threw at me. I had to be stronger than I'd ever been before. I spent hours going over the details of the case, preparing myself mentally. My lawyer had been kind, but he was starting to get frustrated, too. Emma's new lawyer was throwing in every argument they could think of, trying to twist the facts, trying to make me out to be the villain in all of this. And I could see it, how they painted me as the overbearing, emotional grandmother who couldn't accept the reality of her family's choices. It was infuriating, and it hurt more than I was willing to admit. But it wasn't about me anymore. It was about justice. It was about showing Emma that there were consequences for her actions. The day of the new hearing arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I hadn't slept the night before, and I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me as I walked into the courtroom. The judge looked the same, stoic, impartial, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. This case had dragged on far too long. I watched as Emma and her lawyer sat across from me. Emma's eyes met mine, and there was a flicker of something, fear? Defiance? It was hard to tell, but it was enough to make my blood boil. She had dragged me through this once already, and now she was doing it again. I had to be strong. I had to finish this. My lawyer stood up, and the hearing began. This time, I wasn't going to be silent. I wasn't going to let Emma twist the truth. When it was my turn to speak, I stood with a sense of purpose. Your Honor, I began, my voice firm, this isn't just about a ring. It's about a betrayal. A betrayal of trust, of family, of everything that should have mattered. The judge nodded, and I continued. I understand that Emma doesn't see it the way I do. She thinks this is all just a misunderstanding. But I know the truth. She took something from me. She took something from my family. And she has tried to make me the villain for standing up for what's right. I turned to look at Emma, and for the first time, I didn't flinch. I'm not the villain here, Emma. You are. And you need to face the consequences of your actions. Emma's lawyer tried to interrupt, but I didn't let him. I kept speaking, kept pushing, and for the first time, I felt like I was in control of this situation. The judge listened to my words, and when I was done, I could see the shift in his expression. He was no longer just hearing facts. He was hearing the truth. The lawyer tried to twist things again, but the damage was done. I had spoken my truth, and I had made it clear that Emma couldn't just walk away from this. She couldn't keep hiding behind lies. The judge called a brief recess, and I left the courtroom to collect myself. When I came back, I sat down, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that I had done everything I could. The waiting game had begun again, but this time, I was ready. As I sat there, I couldn't help but think of my family, what had happened to it, what had been broken in the process. No matter what the judge decided, this was going to change things forever. And part of me feared that no matter how much justice I received, there would be no way to undo the damage Emma had caused. The final decision came a week later. A week that felt like a month, a time spent in constant uncertainty. I had never known such a heavy silence. My heart had been in my throat the entire week, never knowing if the next phone call would be the one that finally broke me or set me free. When my lawyer called, his voice was calm but serious. Mary, it's over. The judge has made his ruling. I held my breath, the world narrowing down to the few words that were about to come. The hardest part was telling Brian. When I finally sat him down, he looked at me with confusion in his eyes. Mom, what are you doing? Why are you taking this to court? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Because, Brian, this is more than just a ring. Emma took something from me that I can't get back. And I'm not going to let her get away with it. He looked at me like I had slapped him. I don't get it, Mom. It's just a ring. No, Brian, it's not just a ring, I said, my voice steady but firm. It's everything. It's my dignity. It's my trust. And Emma took that from me. She's going to have to face the consequences. He didn't say anything after that. He just stared at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was to him. I wasn't the mother he thought I was. I wasn't the passive, forgiving woman I had always been. I was someone different now, someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. The days turned into weeks, and the court date loomed closer. I could feel the tension building, both in my family and in me. Emma hadn't said much since I filed the papers, but I could feel her seething from a distance. She was angry, and I was angry too. But I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let her win. I spent my nights preparing for the case, reading through the legal documents the lawyer had sent me. I had to be ready. I had to make sure I didn't miss a single detail. This wasn't just about getting the ring back, it was about showing Emma that she couldn't just take what didn't belong to her and expect there to be no consequences. I didn't know how it would end. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let Emma walk away from this without facing the truth. And when the day finally came, I would be ready. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than I expected. I spent the entire morning pacing around my house, trying to steady my nerves. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I hadn't seen Brian since the last conversation we'd had. I knew he was upset, but I couldn't bring myself to care. This wasn't about keeping the peace anymore. This was about justice. When I walked into the courtroom, my stomach churned. I had never been in a situation like this before. I had always trusted my family, always believed that blood was thicker than water. But now, everything felt like a battle. A fight I never imagined I'd have to wage. I sat down at the table with my lawyer, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. Emma sat across from me, her face a mask of indifference. She had the same smug look she always wore, as though nothing she had done was wrong. But I could see the tension in her eyes. She was nervous, trying to hide it, but I could feel the weight of what she'd done pressing on her. The judge entered the room, and I straightened up, trying to keep my composure. The hearing began, and I listened as Emma's lawyer made his case. He was smooth, well-spoken, trying to paint me as some overprotective, sentimental old woman who was making a mountain out of a molehill. It was the kind of argument I had expected, but it still made my blood boil. He had no idea what that ring meant to me. Then it was my turn. My lawyer stood up, and I followed, taking a deep breath before I spoke. Your Honor, I'm not here because of the ring itself. I'm here because Emma took something from me that I cannot replace. She took my trust, my dignity. And she did it knowingly, with no regard for what it meant to my family. I could feel Emma's eyes on me, her expression hardening. But I didn't back down. I couldn't. I went on, telling the court about the ring's history, how it had been passed down through generations, how it was a symbol of the love my husband and I had shared. I told them about the day Emma had asked to borrow it, how I had hesitated but had given it to her out of trust. I spoke about how she had returned it without a word of explanation, as though it was nothing more than a trinket. When I finished speaking, the room was silent. I could feel the eyes of the court on me. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a voice. I felt like I had power. Emma's lawyer tried to argue that I was overreacting, that I was making something out of nothing. But the more I spoke, the more I could see the cracks in his argument. The judge was listening, really listening. And I knew, deep down, that I had made my case. Emma didn't speak much during the hearing. She sat there, her arms crossed, looking more and more uncomfortable as the minutes dragged on. But when it was her turn to speak, she stood up slowly, her eyes darting between me and the judge. Your Honor, she began, her voice weak, I didn't mean for this to go so far. I just borrowed the ring for a party. I didn't know it was worth all this. I'm sorry. It was the same excuse she'd given me on the phone. The same deflection, the same manipulation. I wasn't buying it. I leaned forward, my voice steady but full of conviction. It's not about the ring, Emma. It's about respect. You took something that didn't belong to you, something that meant more to me than you could ever understand. And you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't respond. I could feel the weight of the moment, the decision hanging in the air. The judge looked at both of us, then at the papers in front of him. He didn't speak for a long time, and when he finally did, his voice was calm but firm. I'll review the case and issue a ruling shortly, he said. As the gavel hit the wood, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. The hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning, and when I walked out of that courtroom, I knew that no matter the outcome, I wouldn't let Emma get away with this. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything that mattered to me. I didn't expect the wait to be so agonizing. The days after the hearing dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Every morning, I woke up with that same pit in my stomach, knowing the judge's decision was coming soon, but not knowing when. It felt like a lifetime. And as the days passed, the silence between Brian and me grew louder. He hadn't said much since the hearing. Just the occasional, "I'm sure it'll all work out, Mom." But his voice lacked conviction, and I knew he was still torn. Still unsure about the path I'd chosen. It wasn't just Emma I had to fight. It was the rest of my family, too. No one understood why this was so important. They thought I was making a big deal out of something small, something that could be brushed under the rug. But to me, this was about far more than a ring. It was about the trust one had given to my family, and the betrayal I had experienced at the hands of someone I had welcomed into my life. It was about taking a stand for something that couldn't be bought or sold. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, knitting a scarf for my granddaughter, I received a call. It was my lawyer, and I could tell by his tone that this was the moment I'd been waiting for. "Mary," he said, "the judge has made his ruling. You'll want to come down to the office as soon as you can." My heart raced as I put down my knitting. I had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, I felt like the world was about to change. I didn't know if it was going to be the change I wanted, but I knew it would be the change I needed. I walked into the lawyer's office an hour later, my mind swirling with questions. He handed me a thick envelope, his face unreadable. "The judge's decision is in. Take a look," he said. I opened the envelope slowly, my hands trembling. The letter inside was brief, but the words were clear. Emma was ordered to return the ring and pay restitution for the value of the ring, as well as damages for the emotional distress caused by her actions. I couldn't believe it. The tears that had been building up in my eyes finally fell, but this time, they weren't tears of anger. They were tears of relief. I had done it. I had stood my ground, and the law had backed me up, but the victory wasn't as sweet as I had imagined. As I walked out of the lawyer's office, I couldn't help but think about Emma. The punishment she faced wasn't just about money, it was about forcing her to face the consequences of her actions. To make her understand the gravity of what she had done. And yet, I knew it wouldn't be enough for me. Nothing would truly make up for the betrayal. The phone call came later that evening. It was Emma, and I could hear the anger in her voice before she even said a word. "So, you got your way, huh?" She spat, her tone dripping with resentment. "You're going to ruin my life over a stupid ring?" I stayed calm, my voice steady as I replied, "You did this to yourself, Emma. I didn't want to go to court. I didn't want to make things worse. But you gave me no choice. You're a vindictive old woman, Mary," she hissed. "You've made a fool of me in front of the whole family." "I didn't make a fool of you, Emma. You did that all on your own," I said, my words sharp but firm. "I didn't take the ring. I didn't betray your trust. You did." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But instead, she let out a harsh laugh. "You'll regret this, Mary. Mark my words. This isn't over. Emma is ordered to return the ring, and she's to pay restitution, including damages for the emotional distress she caused. The judge believes you acted in good faith, and that she knowingly took something that didn't belong to her." For a moment, all I could do was stand there, the weight of those words sinking in. I had done it. I had fought and won. But even as the relief flooded through me, I couldn't shake the nagging thought at the back of my mind. Had this victory cost me too much? Emma had lost, but so had I. The family, what was left of it, was shattered. Brian had barely spoken to me since the appeal had been filed. I knew he wasn't happy with how things had turned out, but I also knew he understood why I'd done it. What hurt the most was that he couldn't bring himself to support me, even after everything. The space between us was too wide now, too deep. I couldn't fix it. Not now that I spent the rest of the day in a kind of daze. I didn't know what to do with myself. The battle was over, but the war had left scars. The family I had once known seemed like a distant memory. I hadn't just lost the trust of Emma. I had lost the trust of my son. And that pain was more excruciating than I could have imagined. That evening, I sat on the porch, the cold air biting at my skin, trying to make sense of everything. The ring was back, and Emma would pay for what she had done, but the cost had been high. Brian came by around sunset. He didn't knock, he never did anymore. He just stood in the doorway, his face tight, his posture stiff. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I should have backed you up. I should have understood. But this has been hard for all of us." I didn't know how to respond. The words felt too heavy, like they were trapped somewhere inside me, tangled with all the years of disappointment and hurt. Finally, I looked up at him. "I understand, Brian. But this was never just about the ring. It was about standing up for what was right. And you didn't see that." "I know. I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I should have done more. I was scared of losing Emma, scared of everything falling apart." I nodded, my heart aching. "I know. But sometimes, Brian, we have to let things fall apart to make them right again." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, but it wasn't as suffocating as before. I could feel the distance, yes. But there was a glimmer of something else, too, a hint of understanding, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. But it would take time. Time and patience. Emma didn't show up for the ruling. She didn't even bother to try and fight it anymore. She had been beaten, and now, she would have to live with the consequences. She would have to answer for what she'd done, in more ways than one. But as I sat there, thinking about everything that had happened, I realized something. No matter how much I had won, I would never get back what had been lost. The hardest part was over. But the healing, if it could even be called that, was just beginning. And maybe that was the hardest part of all. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat back in my chair, letting the cool air wash over me. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a long while, I knew one thing for sure. I had fought for my dignity, for my family's honor, and I had won. And that was something no one could take away from me. The days after the ruling were quiet, almost too quiet. I had spent so much time focused on the fight, on the need for justice, that I didn't really know how to move forward now that it was over. The ring was back in its place, Emma was paying for her actions, and the family was starting to heal, but the scars ran deep. I was different now. Stronger, maybe, but also more aware of the fragility of everything I had once taken for granted. Brian came around more often in the days that followed. It wasn't the same as it had been before all of this, but there was an understanding between us now, something that wasn't there before. We still had a lot to work through, but the walls between us had come down. I could see the guilt in his eyes, but I could also see the love. And that was enough for now. I wasn't asking for perfection. I just wanted the honesty, the connection that we used to have. One evening, after dinner, he sat down with me in the living room, looking as if he had something on his mind. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. About you. And I need to say something." I looked up from the knitting I was doing, giving him my full attention. "What is it, Brian?" "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't get it, not at first. I didn't see what you were doing or why you had to go so far. But now I do. I see what you were fighting for. And I'm proud of you, Mom. I really am." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had never needed his approval, not like this, but hearing him say it, that he understood, that he saw what I had done, meant more than I could put into words. It was a quiet sort of victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. "I didn't want to drag you into this, Brian," I said, my voice thick with emotion. But sometimes, we have to fight for what's right. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs us. I know, Mom, he said, his eyes filled with something that resembled regret but also hope. And I think you're right. Sometimes we need to let things fall apart before we can rebuild them. We sat in silence for a while after that, both of us absorbing the weight of those words. There was still a lot of healing to do, but I finally felt like I could breathe again. I could see the path forward, even if it was unclear. The future was no longer about fighting battles or winning at all costs. It was about rebuilding what we had lost, slowly, but surely. As for Emma, I never heard from her again after the ruling. She didn't try to appeal further, and the damage she had caused was irrevocable. She had taken what wasn't hers, and now she would live with the consequences. I didn't want to hate her. I didn't want to carry that weight. But I couldn't forgive her, not yet. Maybe in time. But not now. Not after everything she'd put me through. One morning, as I sat in my favorite chair by the window, the sunlight streaming in and warming the room, I reflected on everything that had happened. I thought about my late husband, about the life we had built together, and about how far I had come. The journey had been harder than I could have imagined, but I had come out of it stronger. More sure of myself than I'd ever been before. I had lost things along the way: trust, innocence, and perhaps a little bit of faith in the people I had loved. But I had also gained something invaluable: my own voice. My own strength. My own sense of justice, and that was something I could never lose. As I finished my knitting, the house felt different. Not quieter, not emptier, but more like home. The storm had passed, and I could finally look out at the horizon with peace in my heart. I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I also knew I had the strength to walk it. And that was enough.